The Gemara that you learned was asking a question about oisek b'mitzvah patur min ha-mitzvah. What is the source of that? That if a person is involved in a mitzvah, he is going to be exempt from another mitzvah. And the truth of the matter is, I believe Rabbi Wernick might have told you Tosfos over here that deals with what happens if you can do both mitzvahs. Are you still exempt? And this is, of course, a topic of discussion among the Rishonim, among the commentaries. Tosfos over here on page 25a has a view that oisek b'mitzvah patur min ha-mitzvah. If you're involved in one mitzvah, you're exempt from another mitzvah if the other mitzvah, if it's going to cause you to be mevatel, to lessen your ability to do one of the mitzvahs. So he says, the imitradi bekiyo mitzvah sukkah having mevatlim mitzvasim. If these people are gonna be involved in the mitzvah of sukkah, it's going to impact their other mitzvahs in a negative way. They're not going to be able to do it properly. And the example that he deals with is you need to feed the animals at a certain time. And if you're busy, if you're going to do this other mitzvah, you're going to end up pushing off the animal, the feeding of the animal, and other things, and therefore, and other necessary things that are involved in a mitzvah. You're doing hashavas aveda. You have animals from someone who left their animals. Tosfos brings an example of a case where you're watching someone else's animals because they lost them, and you're going to return them to their owner. But until you return them, you have an obligation to feed them and to provide whatever they need. And so if a poor person comes to your door and you're supposed to be feeding them, it's going to be a problem for you to go and answer your door and deal with that person, and therefore you're exempt. You don't have to go to answer. In fact, you're probably not supposed to, because it's going to be mevatel your mitzvah that you're properly with watching these lost objects. It's called your shemer aveda. So that is the case that Tosfos deals with. There is another Gemara that Tosfos is quoting, of course, where he's not just making up this example himself. This is a case in the Gemara Bava Metzia that talks about such an example where someone would be exempt from giving tzedakah because they're busy shemer aveda, watching a lost object. And the case, so Tosfos uses that idea over here, and he says, when are you exempt from doing the other mitzvah when it's going to ruin the mitzvah that you're doing a little, that you can't really do both at the same time, and so therefore you'll be exempt. But if you could do both properly, then you really have to do both mitzvahs. So that's the understanding of Tosfos, what this means. Oisek b'mitzvah, you're doing one mitzvah, you're exempt from another mitzvah. That means that if you can't do both, even if you try hard, you won't be able to do both properly. So that would be a problem. Now, the Ran argues with that, and the Ran says that you are exempt even if you could do both, if it's going to be an extra bother for you. If it's an extra bother, then you're exempt from the other mitzvah. You do not have to do the other mitzvah. You're exempt, and because you're not obligated to that. That is this law, that it's exempting you. It's easy to do both, or you're obligated. So he agrees with that idea, that if you could do both, it's fine. But the Ran is more lenient, and he says you don't even have to take that extra step. If it's going to be a tircha yesera, it's going to be an extra bother, you don't have to do it. So even though you're not going to be mevatel, even though you're not going to ruin any of the mitzvahs, but if it's going to be taking an extra step, that it's going to be tircha, it's toisepes tircha, it's an extra bother, then you're exempt from doing that other mitzvah. You're busy doing this mitzvah. Concentrate on what you're doing. Don't go and do another mitzvah. You are exempt. So that's the argument between Tosfos and the Ran. Now, so anyway, the Gemara mentions this law of Oisek b'mitzvah. You're doing a mitzvah, you're involved in a mitzvah, you're exempt from another mitzvah. I should just mention that this mitzvah, both the Tosfos and the Ran talk about, well, when you have tefillin on and you're wearing tzitzis, does that mean you're exempt from mitzvahs now because you're wearing tzitzis? You're wearing tefillin? So both of them clarify, no, that is not what we're talking about, because there you're not even oisek, you're not doing that mitzvah, at all. You're not oisek in it. You're not really. But according to Tosfos, no problem, because of course it doesn't ruin any other mitzvah when you're wearing tefillin, and so Tosfos' answer answers that example. But according to the Ran, the point is that when you're doing tefillin, when you're wearing tefillin and you're wearing tzitzis, it's not mevatel, it's not ruining any other it's not ruining any it's not causing extra bother to do another mitzvah at the same time. But while you're putting tefillin on, while you're putting your tzitzis on, that's another story. There you can't do two things at once. So there you would have an exemption. If it's at the time that you're putting the tefillin on, another mitzvah comes to your hand, your mitzvah is pater min ha-mitzvah. Yes, David.
Yes, so here it says that not only a mourner is exempt from having to put the tefillin on, but it's prohibited from a mourner.
So 1 second, we're not. We're going to soon deal with mourners. 1 second, we're still just going over the first line of the Gemara that you did yesterday.
I was just trying to figure out what's exempt and prohibited is a different thing. You're not only not obligated, you're prohibited. That's the thing I was trying to figure out.
Okay, so I'll just answer you, even though it's really the next piece. With regard to tefillin for a mourner, it's a different issue. With regard to tefillin for a mourner, it's the mourner is not supposed to wear tefillin on the first day of the burial. That day of the burial, they normally don't put tefillin on. But there are different discussions if they could do it privately if they want to. But according to the Gemara, it sounds like they're not supposed to, as you said. And but that's not this category of oisek b'mitzvah pater mitzvah. That's another rule that that an avel is not allowed to wear tefillin on the first day. Okay, so we'll see that. So the Gemara says that our Mishnah said about b'shivtecha b'veisecha u'v'lechtecha v'aderech. Our Mishnah said we see from that pasuk in the Shema that oisek b'mitzvah, you're involved in a mitzvah, you're exempt from another mitzvah. Now, the Gemara brings a source about the law of the Korban Pesach, when there were people that were impure, they were not able to bring the Korban Pesach. In that case, we see from that story that why were they impure? They were impure from the Korban Pesach, to bring the Korban Pesach, because they were doing a mitzvah. They were doing a mitzvah. Now they can't bring the sacrifice. Why? Because you can't be impure and bring a sacrifice. So what we see from that story is that what did they choose to do? Did they choose to be impure and then be stuck later and not be able to bring the sacrifice? Or did they decide not to become impure and instead wait to bring the sacrifice first? And then, after they bring the sacrifice, they do their Paschal obligations, their Pesach mitzvah. Then they can go back and do their tumah, their impurity mitzvah, where they have to bury some. So what we see, what they did was that they made themselves impure. They did their mitzvah. And later, when it came time to bring the carbon Pesach, they actually they had a big problem. They couldn't bring it. So you see from that story that you're supposed to do a mitzvah that comes to your hand, even though it's going to cause you not to do another mitzvah later. Because you're involved in one mitzvah, you're going to be exempt from another mitzvah. That's what you see from that story. That otherwise, maybe they shouldn't have done it. Why did they even bring the carbon Pesach? Maybe they should. Why did they even become impure? Excuse me. Why did they even become impure? They should have waited to bring the carbon Pesach. If one mitzvah doesn't exempt another mitzvah, then they should have waited to bring the carbon Pesach, and then later they would have. They would have done the mitzvah of burial. So what comes out from here is we see that when you do one mitzvah, you are exempt from the other mitzvah, and therefore just do the mitzvah that you're doing, that's here. Now the problem, the case over here is actually a more it has a very powerful element to it, and that is the fact that the Korban Pesach is a mitzvah to bring the Korban Pesach, and it carries with it the kares, the sin of being cut off. If a person doesn't bring their Korban Pesach, it's a very serious, it's a very important mitzvah, and there's reason to think that a person would push off doing the burial in order to do the Korban Pesach, because it carries with it a very harsh punishment if a person doesn't bring the Korban Pesach. So what does the Gemara say? So the Gemara gets involved in what mitzvah were they really do? Who were these people who were tamei? So what happened was they came complaining to Moses and said, we can't bring the Korban Pesach. Is there any plan B? Is there any other option for us? This is a very interesting story in the Chumash, because normally you would think people would be happy to be exempt from a mitzvah and say, okay, we're free. It's almost like if the IRS tells you don't have to pay taxes, and someone calls them and says, but I want to pay taxes. Is there any form I could use and pay the taxes because I'd like to? So here the Lahavdil, of course, but here with Hashem, they said, we want to bring the sacrifice, and Hashem, and Moshe told them, you're exempt from the sacrifice. And they're like, we really would like to bring it anyway. Is there any way you could, find some other? Is there any loophole or leniency that will allow us to bring the Korban Pesach? So they said, Lama Nigara, how could we lose out in this opportunity to bring a sacrifice, to bring the paschal offering? So Moshe brought their question to Hashem, and Hashem said, you know what? We're going to make a special mitzvah called Pesach Sheni. So Pesach Sheni is because these people had asked, they wanted an extra Pesach. Now, so what is the story? What was their real claim? They were exempt. What was their real claim? That why should they get, why did they, they must have had a good claim, like we really would like to bring it. We were stuck. So the understanding was that the Gemara has a discussion here. Number one, possibly they were carrying the ark, the coffin of Joseph, and Joseph's bones. Joseph had died, generations before, but here they have Joseph's bones that they had brought with them from Egypt. And they are tamei because they carried Joseph's bones. Now, those people who were tamei from carrying Joseph's bones, you have to understand, where were they camped when they brought the Pesach paschal offering? They were camped at Sinai. They got the Torah there, and they stayed there for a long time. They stayed there for close to a year, more than a year. They stayed there a little over a year. From Nisan to Iyar. From Nisan 1 year, the first year that they arrived by Mount Sinai, and no, they didn't stay in Nisan. Iyar, Sivan. They camped there at Sivan, Rosh Chodesh Sivan, a little less than a year. Excuse me. They stayed there a little less than a year. They camped there at Sivan, the beginning By Yom Hazeh Bo Midbar Sinai, they came there, Sivan, and they left there. I think it was Chaf El Iyar. They left there the 20th of Iyar. So it was a little less than a year. Now, were they carrying the bones of Joseph all the time? No, they were camped. They put them down. So they were tamei from when they arrived there, Sivan. They were impure all the way till the next year, Nisan. And the next year, Nisan, they of course, everything happened. They worshipped the golden calf, and that was after they got the Torah, they got the tablets were smashed. Then Moshe came down with the second tablets, and on Yom Kippur, they came down on Yom Kippur. Hashem forgave the Yidden. Then they built the tabernacle, and then that Pesach after they finished building the inauguration was Nisan, and then they were going to bring the Korban Pesach that year. This was the one time during the 39 years in the desert that they brought the Korban Pesach in the desert. And the problem was these people had been carrying the Ark of Joseph. But the Ark of Joseph, you have to understand, it was not being carried now. They stopped carrying that 10 months ago. When they arrived, they put it down. They're not walking around with it every day. They put it down and they're camped at Midbar Sinai. So the point is that they were still tamei. In other words, Rabbi Yossi Haglili says, why were they tamei? They were tamei from carrying Joseph's ark. Well, why didn't they make themselves pure? So here you understand that how do you make yourself pure from touching a dead body, carrying a dead body? How do you make yourself pure? You need to have 7 days, right? Tamei Shivas Yam is impure for 7 days, and so 7 days of not touching a dead body, or carrying or being a tent over a dead body, and you need to be sprinkled on from the para aduma, the red heifer, on the third day, and on the 7th day. So you need to be sprinkled on these twice from the red heifer. The ashes, the wood is mixed with water, and then they would sprinkle on you, and then you would be pure after the 7th day is over. You go to the mikvah, and then that night you would be pure. Now the problem is that the question is, when did they have the red heifer? Did they do the red heifer yet? So this is the topic of discussion. It doesn't say it here, but this is really what's going on behind the scenes. I don't know if Rabbi Wernick told it to you, but behind the scenes, what's going on among these opinions, Rabbi Yossi Haglili, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Yitzchok, is did they have the red heifer yet? And that is the question here. So according to Rabbi Yossi Haglili, they did not have the red heifer. So even though they weren't carrying the ark now for the last 10 months, but nevertheless, there is no red heifer there's no way that they can't purify themselves until after they brought Paschal offering. The Paschal offering was brought. Later, after that, they did the first red heifer. So that red heifer was how they purified themselves, and then they brought the second pay. They were able to bring the korban on Pesach Sheni. Now, so that was when the red heifer. So, however, the other opinion says no. These people brought these people were able to purify themselves. This is Rabbi Yitzchok's opinion. Rabbi Yitzchok says, what do you mean they were able to purify themselves? Because he holds that they brought the red heifer was already burned. They did they slaughtered and burnt the red heifer on the first day of Nisan, and then it was slaughtered, and then it was burnt. They were commanded on the 1st of Nisan, and then the 2nd of Nisan it was burned, and they were able to purify themselves in time for the 14th of Nisan when they needed to bring the Korban Pesach. So again, the dates of when the red heifer was made is actually of great importance here to understand this argument. Rabbi Yossi Haglili says that the people who were tamei, they were carrying the Ark of Joseph because he holds that they did not bring they didn't have the ashes of the red heifer yet. So according to him, they're still impure from carrying Joseph's ark. According to Rabbi Akiva, they're impure from from bringing from Mishal and El Safan, because the Mishal and Safan are impure because they brought out the body of Nadav and Avihu. Nadav and Avihu passed away on the first day of Nisan. That was the first day of Nisan was the Yom Hashmini, the 8th day of the the 8th day of the Meluim, of the inauguration of the tabernacle, and so they passed away on that day, and we needed someone to take them out of the holies. Mishal and Otzafan carried them out, and so therefore Mishal and Otzafan are impure. Now the question is, okay, so you're impure, but it's only the first day of Nisan. You got till the 14th. What's wrong? Why can't you purify yourself with the red heifer? According to Rabbi Akiva, they didn't have the ashes of the red heifer yet. That's the understanding of why Rabbi Akiva argues on Rabbi Yitzchok. So Rabbi Yossi Glili says, yeah, they didn't have the ashes of the red heifer, and that's why Rabbi Yossi Glili says it's the Ark of Joseph. According to Rabbi Akiva, they didn't have the ashes of the red heifer yet. That's why it's Mishal and Eltzafan who are impure, because they carried Nadav and Avihu. And then Rabbi Yitzchok says, no, they had the ashes of the red heifer. It was done on the second day of Nisan, and they burnt it. They burnt it. They made the red heifer, the water, the sprinkling water, and they were pure. So Mishal and Eltzafan and the people who carried the Ark of Joseph, according to Rabbi Yitzchok, they were able to bring.
Lost you, Rabbi. Rabbi, we don't hear you. You're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not sure where you lost me, but basically all I was saying was that Rabbi Yitzchok holds that they brought they were able to use the sprinkling water with the red heifer ashes on Mishal and Eltzafan, who carried out Nadav and Avihu, the sons of Aaron, who died on the first day for bringing the extra fire on the altar, and they were able to sprinkle the red heifer ashes with the water mixed with the water on the people who carried the Ark of Joseph. And the problem, the people who were impure, so Rabbi Yitzchok says it must have been people who were involved in a mace mitzvah. And the way Rashi translates mace mitzvah is that this was people who were involved in, just a regular, just someone happened to pass away and they had to bury him. Not necessarily a mace mitzvah where there was no one else to bury the person, but the mace mitzvah meaning that they had a mitzvah to bury their relative. So they were involved in a burial of a Jewish person, and therefore they were impure in order to be able to bring the Paschal offering, which was a problem, and therefore it says, but the exact schedule that they were on is that they were not able to bring the Paschal offering that day. And the implication is, but they could have brought it the next day, meaning they would have been pure on the next day. So they were almost pure. They had done a burial maybe on the 7th, or they were almost pure, but they weren't 100% pure for to be able to bring it. Now, of course, one of the big discussions here is, now let's say they're not going to be able to sacrifice the animal. They don't have to sacrifice it. Let the Kohen slaughter it, or some other Israelite slaughter it, and ultimately they'll eat it that night. What's wrong with it? They're going to be pure that night after they go to mikvah and after they after the sun sets. It's called Par of Shemesh, the sun sets, and they go to mikvah. They're called the Tful Yoim. They go to mikvah that day. Then at night the sun sets. So the question was, and this was their issue, is we want to be able to eat. We want to bring the Paschal offering. Why don't you people slaughter it? Have us in mind. And even though we're impure now, because it's the 14th, which is the 14th day of Nisan, which was their 7th day of impurity, and they said, let us be able to eat the sacrifice tonight. Let us be yotzeh. We shall fulfill the mitzvah of the sacrifice. That was their question, and the answer that the conclusion, at least according to this opinion, was that they can't. You can't do that. You can't bring a sacrifice for someone who's not eligible to eat it, because he's not eligible to eat it. They're not able. They don't bring. You can't bring the sacrifice for such a person, and they basically have to wait till the next opportunity, which is Pesach Sheni. So they would be able to bring a Pesach Sheni. It's a very interesting sikha where the Rebbe says, you see from the story, how we have to demand Mashiach, because look at how these people, they demanded to have a mitzvah to bring the Korban Pesach, and what did Hashem do? He gave them this. He gave them an extra mitzvah that they, like he so to speak, bent the rules and said, okay, we'll give you an extra opportunity to bring Mashiach. And so in fact, in the Chumash, it doesn't say this story when it happened. It says it in a different place. It sort of like hides this story. And the reason it hides it is because it's an embarrassment. And the embarrassment that the Jewish people only brought one Korban Pesach the whole time in the desert. This was the only time they brought the Korban Pesach, the first year that they were in the desert. All the other years in the desert, they didn't bring the Korban Pesach. So the question is, what do you mean it's an embarrassment? Hashem didn't command them to bring it the other years. They weren't obligated to. They were only obligated the first year, and then they had the Pesach Sheni, and that was it. They didn't have to bring it all the other 38 years. They were not obligated to. So why is it such an embarrassment? So the Rebbe says, you know why it's an embarrassment? Because they should have, what happened this year? They demanded, you see from Pesach Sheni that they demanded they asked, they begged, they requested. So they should have done that the other years, you know? So it's an embarrassment that they didn't beg and ask for an opportunity to bring the Korban Pesach. So this is like a inspiration for us we have to beg Hashem for Mashiach. And this is what Hashem is waiting for. He's expecting us to beg him. That's why in davening we say it. The question is if we have it in mind. So we constantly are begging Hashem for Mashiach, but we have to really feel that way, that we're understand that we're begging Hashem just like they begged Hashem Lama Nigara. The term that they used was, why should we be left out? Why should we lose out? So so in any event, so you have here the story, and really these are side points. So we just went through that discussion, but the point is that these are cases where what did they choose to do in this story? They chose to be tameh, even though they are not going to be able to bring the Korban Pesach later on when they're supposed to bring it. They chose that they're going to be tameh, even though there's going to be a mitzvah of Korban Pesach, and they're not going to be able to do it. Or at least they weren't sure if they're going to be able to do it. They did their mitzvah, and they didn't deal with the fact that there is a mitzvah that's going to come. Why? Because it must be that oisek b'mitzvah, when you're doing one mitzvah, you're exempt from another mitzvah. Now, the Gemara says that you're right. You see this both places. You see in the Shema that if you're involved in one mitzvah, you're exempt from another mitzvah. And you see it with the Korban Pesach, the same idea that if you're doing one mitzvah, like burial of the dead or carrying the ark or carrying coffin, these people were exempt from bringing the Korban Pesach, even though Korban Pesach is a very serious mitzvah, very important mitzvah, and it carries with it the punishment of kares. Now, the Gemara answers, yeah, so we need both. Why do we need both? Because you have to understand there's two separate cases. One case is a case where the obligation of the Korban Pesach hasn't arrived yet. So in that case, it makes more sense to say, or there's logic to say that to rationalize and say, well, here I got to do the mitzvah of burial. I got to do the mitzvah of burial because what's going to happen? I don't have another mitzvah in front of me. The other mitzvah is not happening now. Okay, it's happening in a few days from now, but it's not happening right now. So here it's like I only really have one mitzvah in front of me. Now, so therefore, that would be a case that teaches you that when you have one mitzvah in front of you and you have another mitzvah that's coming to you in a few days, do the mitzvah that's with you now. That you see from the Korban Pesach story. But what about if you have two mitzvahs right in front of you? You're doing one, and there's another mitzvah right now. So you're involved. You're getting married. You're in the midst. You're the chassan. In case he's under the chuppah, and it's time to say Shema. So the time of Shema has arrived. So in that case, I would say that here you can't just say, "Oh, I'm just going to do the marriage and I'm not going to do the Shema mitzvah." Do the Shema mitzvah maybe. You can't say, "Oh, it's happening in a few days." It's happening right now. It's happening right now. I should do that other mitzvah. So that's why you need b'shivtecha b'veisecha v'lechtecha b'derech in the Shema that teaches you if you're involved in one mitzvah, you are exempt from doing the other mitzvah. And then it says what? So maybe it should just say the case of Shema that the chassan is exempt. It shows even if you have another mitzvah right now that you are exempt. It's not like it's in a few days. Do the mitzvah you're involved in now. You're in the midst of doing your chuppah. Finish your chuppah mitzvah. You're gonna miss Shema, okay? You'll miss the time for Shema, but you're in the midst of doing your chuppah mitzvah. Do your chuppah, do your wedding, and you're exempt from Shema. That should teach us all cases. No, where it says you still need the case of the Korban Pesach. Why do we need that case of Korban Pesach? That if you're involved in one mitzvah, you're exempt from another mitzvah, because that shows you that even if the other mitzvah is much more important, much more machmir, chumrah, it has an extra strictness to it, that it's kares, carries with it the punishment of kares. Even in such a case, tzricha, we need to hear that law that you can do your mitzvah of, let's say, carrying the coffin of Yosef's bones, and you're gonna miss the mitzvah Korban Pesach. You're doing this, and you're gonna miss such a big mitzvah Korban Pesach. You're gonna miss it out. Yeah. Yitzchok mitzvah is patur min ha-mitzvah. Now, what's interesting is, are you allowed to do the other mitzvah if you want? So this is there's a Rashi over here, page 25b, where Rashi says, "Alma mitzvah kala haboli yodcha." You see from here that a lesser mitzvah that comes to your hand, ein michad sarech l'tchoisa. You don't have to push it. Because a more strict mitzvah is going to come. Maybe you should push off your smaller mitzvah to do a much bigger, stricter mitzvah. No, you don't have to. It sounds from Rashi that maybe if you want to, you could. One of the other commentaries says the opposite. He says, you're not allowed to. You're supposed to be doing the mitzvah that comes to your hand now, and you're not allowed to do the other mitzvah. In other words, the way Rashi puts it is, you're allowed to do this mitzvah. It's a little, it seems like it's an exemption. Like you don't have to push off this mitzvah for that mitzvah. The other commentary says, you're not allowed to. The mitzvah says, you're not allowed to push off one mitzvah because you want to do another mitzvah. No, this mitzvah is coming to you. This is meant for you to do. You got to do it now. This is the will of Hashem to do this mitzvah, and even though a bigger mitzvah is going to come later. Now, so that's really the end of that piece. I'm going to start here with Gufa. We're going to start Gufa. There's a dot in the middle of the it's must be about 12 lines. 13 lines from the top of the page. 13 lines from the top of the page, on page 25b, Gufa. Gufa is a term the Gemara uses that we just stated. It was this this was a statement just mentioned. Gufa, it was just mentioned. We turn to the discussion that it just said. Amar Rab Abba Bar Zavda Amar Rav. Abba Bar Zavda said in the name of Rav, and this statement was mentioned earlier on which we had learned Thursday, Wednesday, where we spoke about the basula, the person getting married. There's a difference if he's marrying a virgin, marrying a widow, and then what happens if a person's boat sinks? Is he exempt from mitzvahs? Is he and things like in the discussion of being exempt from mitzvahs because of pain, because of either you're doing a mitzvah or you're in pain. Seem to be some are worried. You're worried or concerned. You're overwhelmed. So these were the discussions. So we had mentioned there that if your boat sinks, are you exempt? And an avel is the Gemara had said that avel is chayiv in all mitzvahs, exempt from tefillin. But the Gemara answered that there's a tirda de mitzvah and there's a tirda de reshus, and that was the Gemara on 25a, where it said there's a difference between overwhelmed for a mitzvah. In other words, the Gemara said that the person marries a virgin, he's overwhelmed with the mitzvah of the laws of marrying a virgin, and nervous that she's not a virgin, and so on. And so that's called a tirda de mitzvah. And the person who marries a widow, he's not worried about that because he knows she's not a virgin. He's not concerned. Now, so the Gemara says, oh, so overwhelming is an issue. If you're overwhelmed, that's a reason to be exempt from a mitzvah. And I was like, Shema, you're exempt from Shema. Then the Gemara says, what happens if you're overwhelmed because your boat sunk? So the Gemara says, so if you're going to say you're exempt, we know an avel is not exempt. So you can't say you're exempt, but why not? You're tarid. So the Gemara's answer was there's a tirda the mitzvah and a tirda the. So now the Gemara is bringing back that Gemara. So Gufa, we just learned. Amar Rabba Bar Zabda Avel Chai B'Chol Mitzvahs Amor B'Torah. An avel is obligated in all mitzvahs that are written in the Torah, chutz min tefillin, except for tefillin. This is what David was bringing this statement, that an avel is obligated to all mitzvahs, but he's exempt from tefillin. That, of course, it means on the first day. The Shehari Nemer Behen Be'er, it says about tefillin that they are considered their beautification. And an avel is not allowed to beautify himself, and therefore he doesn't put tefillin on. As I mentioned, there is a discussion. There seems to be some minhag, but it's not a well-known minhag, but it seems to be some type of exemption that if they want to do tefillin, maybe in privacy, they might be allowed to. But the general minhag and a general accepted halacha is that they're usher maybe to put tefillin on. And so the Gemara says, because we learn this from the fact that Hashem told Yechezkel, your pe'er, even though his wife had died, he should put tefillin on. Pe'ercha, your pe'er, your beautification, chavoy shalecha, you should wear. And since Hashem told him that, it taught us that Hashem was telling him a hoyra'ah, like a teaching for just this moment. Like, you got to do it. What did that imply? Atu de machayeves. You are machayev. You are the one who's mechuyev. You are obligated to do this, even though you're mourning, even though your wife just passed away. But aval kuli alma patir, but the whole world is exempt. And vahani mili b'yarishan. And when does this apply? Only on the first day of the day of death, the fura, burial. That is when that is when this exemption is applicable. Of course, if you ever go to a shiva house, you always see them wearing tefillin, because normally the shiva, the shachris minyan at shiva doesn't start till the second day. The first day you'll have a mincha ma'ariv at a shiva house, but so you don't see that the avel didn't put tefillin on. But and then the other days of shiva, they have a shachris at the shiva house. Of course, this is where they're wearing tefillin. So the reason is because this exemption is only applicable on this is only applicable on the first day. The chsiv, as it says, that the main pain is on the first day. What it says in Amos, "Va'acharisa kiyoim mar," that it's like the day of bitterness. That it's referring to the day of bitterness, not the many days, not the 7 days of bitterness. It's the one day of bitterness. That means the day of the death, the day of the burial. That's the day of the bitterness, and therefore that would be the day that one is exempt from tefillin. So we just mentioned this Gemara to emphasize. Seems like the purpose is that it's emphasizing that the exemption is only on the first day, and that's why it's mentioning this statement. In other words, we said this already. What's it adding? It's adding that the B'yom Rishon, that the first day, it only applies for thing. Now, and another statement. This may be also why it's mentioning it, because it's a halacha that's applicable to sukkah, that an avel, and it's also discussion here about being overwhelmed, and we're talking about being exempt from certain mitzvahs. So it says an avel is actually obligated in sukkah. Now the Gemara asks, Pshita, isn't that obvious? Wouldn't that be obvious that an avel is obligated in all mitzvahs? Why would he be exempt from sukkah? So the answer is, Ma'udetema. You might have thought to say, you might have said, Hoyel, since the Amar, Rava says, Mitzdayer, Potter min ha-sukkah, a person who is in pain is exempt from the sukkah, Mitzdayer, and which is one of the reasons why most people don't sleep in the sukkah, by the way, is because they're called Mitzdayer. They are in pain, and they are someone who's in pain is exempt from the sukkah. So it says, actually, there's different Yersois. It's either Rabba Bar Zavda Amarav, or it's Rava, but it seems like there's two versions of who said this. But anyway, Mitzdayer is Potter from sukkah. So Hainami Mitzdayer. So you would think that an Avel, a mourner, person whose relative passed away, he is a Mitzdayer and is mourning, grieving. He is in pain, and therefore he should be exempt from the sukkah because he's suffering, he's in pain. So the Gemara says, Kamash Malana comes and lets us hear. In other words, either Rav or Rava comes and lets us hear that Hani Mili Tzara de Memela. This is only pain that comes because of the sukkah. In other words, the cold, the heat, the bad smell, whatever it is that you can't push away. This type of this is pain that comes sort of like you have no say in it. It's pain that comes automatically. But here the person is pained over his relative. It's expected of him to push away the pain. He should be calming himself in order to push away the pain to fulfill the mitzvah of sukkah. So again, the point is that if it's internal pain, like here, where it's you're bringing the pain onto yourself because you're concentrating and dwelling too much on the pain of the person losing his relative. So that he's not exempt from because it's his fault. But if it's pain that's there, no matter what, it's too cold. You didn't make it cold. You're not bringing the coldness on you. It is cold. It's there is something uncomfortable. So there you are called a mitzdayer. You're exempt from the sukkah. It's not that you brought it on yourself. But here the Gemara says it's considered that you are bringing the pain on yourself because you should dwell. You should be able to dwell on the mitzvah. That you should think about the mitzvah, and instead of bringing the pain, the thoughts of pain on, you should push away those thoughts of pain that you're going through, and think about the mitzvah. There is one of the commentaries has a different interpretation here, and he says that the exemption from sukkah doesn't apply to an avel because the avel benefits when people are around him. And so the Gemara's answer is that a little different translation than the way we just translated it, and this is that the regular pain you're exempt from a sukkah, but an avel's pain is the fact that he's going to be lonely, and if he would be amongst people, he will actually get out of his pain, and therefore he would be obligated in the sukkah in order to calm his pain. In other words, a regular person is not calmed by a sukkah, but an avel, a mourner, is going to be calmed by a sukkah, so he will be obligated in dwelling in the sukkah in order to calm his pain. So tzar de memela. So the way this commentary would explain the Gemara is hani mili. When does this apply that he's exempt from a sukkah? That's tzar de memela. That's when it's pain. That's automatic. It's going to happen. But here, in other words, he'll have this pain when he dwells in the sukkah. It's going to happen. But here, when he dwells in the sukkah, he won't have it. Here, here, if he's not in the sukkah, he's in pain, and he and he needs to go to the sukkah to relieve his pain, and therefore he'd be obligated to go to the sukkah. An avel would be obligated to go to the sukkah to be amongst other people and be able to relax his pain, and therefore the regular case of mitzdaer doesn't really apply to an avel. So again, there's two interpretations of how to learn this Gemara about an avel being exempt from being obligated in a sukkah. Why isn't he called mitzdaer? He's either not called mitzdaer because he should be able to concentrate, or he's not called mitzdaer because actually in a sukkah he's going to have less pain than if he's outside of the sukkah. So two interpretations. Okay, David, did you want to ask something on this Gemara? Because you had mentioned it before and I cut you off. I said we're going to be learning it. Was this the piece that you were referring to?
Yeah. I was asking about. I was talking about that a person is not obligated for tefillin, but here it says that not only is he not obligated, he's not allowed to put tefillin.
Right. So, so the understanding that some have is that's the meaning of this Gemara, that an avel is when it says that you have to wear tefillin. It's implying that Yechezkel is obligated, and Kuli Alma Patiri, everyone else is exempt and is even prohibited from doing tefillin. But that has to do with the fact that it's called pe'er. It's called beautification, sort of like a contradiction to his avelus. It's a contradiction to his mourning. So it looks like he's not mourning. So therefore, there would be a reason that he shouldn't be allowed to put tefillin on the first day. But in the case of Oisek b'mitzvah patur min ha-mitzvah, there are those that learn that way as well, that you're doing one mitzvah, you're prohibited from doing the other mitzvahs. But we did see Rashi doesn't necessarily follow that, because the wording of Rashi implies like you might be allowed to, we also saw that in the case of Oisek b'mitzvah patur min ha-mitzvah, if you're able to do both, so and it's not going to be an extra bother. So you definitely, according to, it seems like everyone agrees that you have to do both. Okay, so now we have the next Gemara. Amar Bamar Reb Abba Bar Zavda Amar Rav. Okay, so it says that who's exempt from dwelling in the sukkah? A chassan. The Shushvinim are his friends, close friends, that are rejoicing with him, and they're also involved in the needs, the necessities of the chuppah, the chasana. V'chol b'nei hachuppah, and all the people of the chuppah, all of these people that are participating, and they would be exempt from the sukkah. The term in sukkah called shiva, all the 7 days of the and
we lost your audio for a minute there.
What is that?
We lost your audio for a minute.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, let me. Okay, let me read it again. Rabba Zabda says the name of Rav. Chassan, the chassan, the groom. Marcheshvan, and the friends, all of his friends that are rejoicing with him, with his close friends. They're rejoicing with him, and they're involved in the needs of the chasana. That they're sort of helping out with the necessities, and every hachuppah, all the people that are participating in this wedding in the chuppah, and they're celebrating with him. They're paturim na sukkah kol shiva. They're exempt from the sukkah all 7 days of the Sheva brachos. My time of what is the reason? Mishum debo lemechde, because they need to rejoice. It's a mitzvah to rejoice with the chassan and kala. Chassan and kala is a special mitzvah. You rejoice with them, and these people need to fulfill that mitzvah, and therefore they're exempt from dwelling in the sukkah because they want to rejoice. So the Gemara asks, what do you mean? Why can't they rejoice? Let them eat and let them rejoice in the sukkah. Why? So the Gemara says, that the rejoicing of a chassan and kala can only be done in the place where it's special for where we call the chuppah, but the chuppah here means where they're going to be dwelling for the 7 days of rejoicing. That's the term of chuppah over here. This is at least the way Tosfos explains it. That it's referring to the house where the chassan celebrates. In the olden days, you have to understand, was a little different than now, that they used to have, like, friends would come over the whole Sheva brachos, and they would be rejoicing together. Now it's more official. Then it was more. Well, now it's like we have the meals. People come. Then they would come to his house. It was more of a warm type of relationships where they would have his close friends would come and they would rejoice. So the ein simcha ela b'chuppah, it has to be in his house. So the Gemara says, let them rejoice. Okay, over there, they hang out and dance and sing and whatever, the rejoice in the chuppah. No problem. The chuppah meaning the house where he's hanging out during the 7 days of the Sheva brachos. But let him eat in the sukkah. So the Gemara says, no, ein simcha ela b'makam sukkah. The rejoicing has to be where the meal is, and therefore it would have to be in the chuppah, meaning in the house. So the Gemara says, "Levdu chuppah b'sukkah." Why don't you make that they should make that that's where their dwelling is during it's during Sukkot. Let's say let them live there. Make that their main living. So Abai Yomer Shom Yichud. Abai says the problem is Yichud. What does that mean? Yichud. Yichud means that the problem is that they're going to end up. There's going to end up being a time when the friends that he has a friend over, and he's going to have to go down. They used to make the sukkah on the roof. So the husband, the chassan, the new groom, he might have to excuse himself. And what's going to happen? His wife, the bride, is going to be alone with another man. So because of that, we don't want that to be the case. And if it's upstairs if it's on the roof, the sukkah, there's going to be a problem of yichud. It's in the house, no problem. They're rejoicing in the house, and it's not an issue. But if he has to leave the upstairs, if you have to leave the roof, that would be a problem of yichud. The other, Rava says the problem is mishum tzar chosan, that it's uncomfortable there to be with his wife in a sukkah, because it seems like the sukkahs then had 3 walls, and he can't really be like close, can't feel close to her without is embarrassed to be in a sukkah that's open. He doesn't feel comfortable with his wife and with his new bride. So therefore, they didn't make the chuppah in the sukkah. Therefore, they would make the chuppah. The chuppah was their dwelling, where they were going to dwell those 7 days, not inside a sukkah. Even though, of course, there's a mitzvah to dwell in a sukkah, but they would not. They wouldn't do that. It wasn't comfortable. They weren't obligated, basically, and not only are they exempt, even the shushvinin, the friends, and all the people of the participating in the chuppah, they are they are all going to be exempt from eating in the sukkah. They could have meals there with the chassan and kalam. It sounds like they used to rejoice more than even more than we do now. Like throughout the days, all day they were rejoicing. Anyway, the Gemara says, "My beinayu." What's the difference between these 2 reasons, either yichud or chassan, and the tsar chassan? It's either a problem of yichud or a problem of tsar chassan. The Gemara says the case. If there's a lot of people that are going and coming, so you don't have to worry about yichud. According to the opinion that the problem is yichud, not a problem. According to the problem that it's a pain for the chassan to that he's not, that when there's no one there, or that it's painful, he's not comfortable. According to the reason that it's a tsar for him, so this is also he still has tsar even when there's other people. The fact that it's in a chuppah would be different than if it's in his house. So that's why he would be, according to that reason, he would be exempt. Without yichud, wouldn't be a problem, because so therefore they could do it in the chuppah, in the sukkah. But mitzad tsar chosan, he's uncomfortable. I don't know why they couldn't just make a 4th wall. There's, I guess, seemingly that would be a good excuse. Why can't they just make a 4th wall? Anyway, I'm going to leave that with that question. My time is up. But anyway, Zay Gesund, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you,
Thank
Rabbi.
you, Rabbi.
Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye, everyone.